What is going on, everybody? Welcome back in. It is Dog Talk with your host, Holden. Glad to have you guys here as we get ready to bring you guys another episode. We've got Mississippi State on tap for this week. That's what we're going to be catching up on and previewing this week. We've got a few things to kind of touch on before we get to that point, and going to start things off with our injury report, kind of like we do generally every week, getting that injury report in ahead of the game so we kind of know who we're dealing with and who we're not necessarily dealing with. In this game, it does look like the two players, really only two players on my list right now. Actually, I lied. There are three players that are out that we know of for certain. That's Smile Munden battling a foot injury. I guess we now know that this is a foot injury that he sustained in practice a couple of weeks ago that held him out of the Auburn game this past week. So technically, I guess that was last week. And then we'll also hold him out this week. Don't know the extent of that. Don't know when we will get him back. Tate Ratledge is also out with the ankle injury. Sustained earlier in the season as well. I think what I've been reading, and you may have seen this same thing, is that it looks like he's trying to get back by the time we get to that Florida game. Not too sure on that. And then Roderick Robinson also with the foot injury. Have not seen him so far this season. He's not ruled out for the season, so maybe at some point in time we get him back. Questionable in this one's going to be Jared Wilson as well as Jordan Hall. Does look like Wilson got a few snaps last week, but for the most part, Drew Bobo taking most of those snaps there at center. So that's kind of what we have on the injury report. Let's get to one other piece of news before we get to it, because it's been a hot topic all week long, and that is the arrest of Colby Young. No longer with the team as of right now. He has been suspended indefinitely by the University of Georgia's football team for the allegations against him, and I will always make sure to just kind of keep it this way. The word is you're guilty until proven or you're innocent until proven guilty. Excuse me. So obviously he has to answer for his mistakes or anything that's going on in this. The wording of this arrest looks absolutely awful, and there's no way to protect anybody from any of that. So we will wait to see what comes out with this. Obviously, if the allegations against him are meant to be true, then pretty terrible situation there. And you understand the university's stance on that, and obviously Kirby's stance as well. We just don't stand for that here at the University of Georgia. So moving on from that, we'll kind of get into some of this previewing the Mississippi State game that we got on tap for this week. And there's a lot to kind of get to here. I want to start off talking about Georgia. Then we'll talk about a little bit about Mississippi State, just kind of where everything stands right now. Georgia obviously coming into this one ranked 5th with a 4-1 record on the season. Georgia offensively right now is where most of the question marks are. Defensively, Georgia is 13th in the country, only giving up 14.4 points a game. Strength of schedule, obviously the record is itself are also both very highly ranked. Only giving up 72 points on the season, but has scored 162, so outscoring opponents 160 to 72. But offensively, we're getting 32 points a game, which might not be too bad most seasons, but that's 47th in the country. That's enough to be 47th in the country. Not on an elite level that Georgia should be offensively. We've got some questions to get answered. I hope we get them answered in this, because when we talk about Mississippi State here in a minute, we'll kind of be able to see where I think Georgia can lean pretty heavy on one side of the ball. And, you might not have to really throw the ball a lot in this game, but we're going to kind of see that here in just a minute. Stats so far through the season, as we are 5 games in, almost at that that halfway point after this 6th game this week. Carson Beck, 1,359 yards, 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He is at a completion rate of 65.8%. I believe that's a little lower than what it was last season. Trevor Etienne does lead the rushing category, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. Behind him, Nate Frazier at 151 and the 1 touchdown. Your receiving leader right now, at least, is Arian Smith, 278 yards, 2 touchdowns. Dominic Lovett behind him at 252 with 2 touchdowns. And then you have Dylan Bell at 216 with 3 touchdowns. And then the leading receiver for that Auburn game was Colby Young, again, not with the team. Lawson Lucky behind that at 135, 2 touchdowns. London Humphrey, 103 yards and a touchdown. And then we kind of go down from there with some of the other guys as well. That's kind of some of your stat leaders in this one. Do want to give credit out to the defensive guys, too. So far on the season, Dan Jackson leads in total tackles at 26. He and C.J. Allen both have 26. 20 of those are solo tackles for Dan, 15 of which are solo tackles for C.J. Both of them with a couple of tackles for loss. And their Malachi Starks does come in right behind them at 25 tackles. So far, 2 tackles for loss, does have 1 interception on the season. Dan Jackson also has 1 interception on the season as well. Raylan Wilson, Dalen Everett, KJ Bolden, Jalen Walker, Smile Munden. All of these guys have some pretty good tackles so far on the season and look good defensively. Got to give credit out to Anthony Evans taking all of the punt returns so far. That's going to be a question that we're going to need to see in here now that we're kind of starting to take a step back on our wide receiver, having to get another guy kind of filling in that position. Is this an opportunity for Anthony Evans to step up and maybe find himself in that role more? Maybe an Arian Smith starting to actually bust through a little bit more. Again, he leads as far as yardage goes, the team so far. Most of that's because he's having these big plays because he's averaging 15.4 yards every catch that he gets in this season so far. So that's something to kind of look at there. He is averaging the high yards. That's because when he does catch the ball, it's usually for long yardage in there. But do some of these other guys kind of step up in this spot? Do you have that London Humphreys start to try to make a name for himself even more so in this with the departure of Colby Young? Those are some things to kind of look at and just ponder upon, I guess you'd say. On the kicking side, hey, credit out to Peyton Woodring so far on the season. Looking really good, both in field goals and in extra points made. Brett Thorson, obviously handling things with punting this season. 17 punts, averages 47.7 yards per punt, doing a great job there. On the special teams side of things, Peyton Woodring obviously leading the charge in points for the team. 38, Dylan Bell with 24, Trevor Etienne with 18, Lawson Lucky 14, Arian Smith, Branson Robinson, Colby Young, and Dominic Lovett all with 12. Cash Jones, London Humphreys, Nate Frazier all with 6 with the 1 touchdown piece in there. So that's kind of where things look, Georgia, as far as player statistics. Now when we look at overall category here, Georgia offensively is getting 289.8 yards per game in this. This is what we're averaging per game, yardage-wise, through the air, passing. 2.4 touchdowns a game. Rushing, we're at about 131.6 on the season, 1.6 touchdowns, obviously, per game in this as well. Then we look defensively, we're giving up 169.6 yards per game, and 120, I'm reading kind of backwards here. So let me kind of start that entire statistical category over. Georgia offensively gains about 421.4 yards a game. 131.6 of that comes on the ground, 289.8 through the air. Then defensively, we give up about 298 yards a game. 128 of that comes on the ground. 169 is coming through the air. So that's where we look on that. Turnovers, Georgia does average offensively almost a turnover a game, but we also almost gain that a game as well. It's 0.8 is what it reads on here so far. But then now let's kind of take a look on the other side of the ball at Mississippi State. Mississippi State, just in all honesty, not a very good football team in all aspects. They give up a lot more points than they've scored so far on the season to their opponents, 158 to 137 that they have scored. Offensively, points per game is 27.4. That's 81st in the country. And then opponents' points per game is 31.6, which is 110 out of 134 in the country. So, again, just not very good. They're a 1-4 team coming into this. Haven't won a game in the SEC so far. And this is kind of why right here. Offensively, they get 380 yards a game, 136 on the ground, 243 through the air. But then they give up a lot more than that. They give up 438 yards a game. The bulk of that is pretty even, really. The bulk of that's coming on the ground, 213 and then 225 through the air. So this is a game where I kind of expect Georgia to come into this and really be able to run the ball pretty effectively. I would hope so in this game. And this is where I want to see a healthy dose of Trevor Etienne as well as Nate Frazier behind him. Again, no knock on Branson Robinson. I think we'll see him in this game plenty as well, but I'd like to see a good, healthy dose of those guys. And then obviously with Carson just kind of opening things up as that run game opens up as well. The last 5 meetings between Georgia and Mississippi State, Georgia has won the last 4 of the 5. Last time Mississippi State won this game was at Mississippi State in 2010. And then the last 4 meetings again, Georgia wins in 2011, 17, and 20, all at home. And then just a couple of years ago, we went to Mississippi State in 2022, and Georgia won that one. Obviously, Georgia does lead the meeting in this 20-6, 20-6 so far on the season. Through all of this. I don't know when is the first time we played in this game. I don't really have those kind of stats. But I fully expect Georgia to be able to come into this one. Really kind of a strange time of a kick. It's 4:15. I think it's all on the SEC network in this game. The last I looked, the line on this game is like 34 Georgia's way. I've seen it on one page. It went to 33.5. But last I saw it, it was still sitting right there at that 34 mark. So Georgia is expected to pretty much handle this game, almost 5 touchdowns up on Mississippi State. And again, this is a home game for you. It's not a night game, but it is a later in the afternoon game. I expect Georgia to come ready for this. Earlier in the week, and I don't know if I just kind of read into this where I was like, man, Georgia, this would be interesting to see Georgia come in and black this game out. And then Kirby wore like a black shirt, I think on Tuesday, maybe for one of his meetings, and I was like, is this a sign that Georgia's about to black out Mississippi State? Not that you need to do that. Obviously, Kirby said that as well, but I think it's just it's a fun thing. That's all there is to it. It's not necessarily about getting your players hype. It's not necessarily about getting your fans hype. It's just a fun thing to get to see something different. A lot of teams do that. Not that you have to do that, Georgia, but it's still just a fun thing to get to see and just one of those more interactive things where fans kind of enjoy it. That's all there is to it. Doesn't necessarily have to mean that it shouldn't take that for your team to be motivated. That's not what I'm saying at all. Again, I think you can just have fun from time to time, and I think it's kind of fun to be able to see your team wearing that black jersey that they never wear. So that's kind of where I stand on it, but that just is what it is. Let's look at some of the other games that are going on around the country because, again, Georgia, this isn't like a Vanderbilt going into that Alabama game at home. That's not what this is. Vanderbilt has shown signs of life all season so far, and Mississippi State really has not done that at all. Unfortunately, has not been that for them. Vanderbilt showed life against a number of the teams that they've already played, with the exception to Georgia State, and I still think that was a fairly close game as well. But Mississippi State has not. Let's see, they start the season, their first win is against Eastern Kentucky. You should win that game. You're an SEC team, and you're playing a non-major team that you should crush, and they did, 56-7. But then they go to Arizona State. They lose 30-23. Then they play Toledo, and they get absolutely crushed by a MAC team, 41-17 at home, by the way. Then Florida goes there, another not good team, and Florida crushes Mississippi State 45-28, also at Mississippi State. Mississippi State did go to Texas. This is the only fight I've seen in them so far, which was the first quarter being close with Texas in this game, but they still lose 35-13. I've seen a lot of talking heads say that they could do the same thing at Georgia in this one, really giving them a fight. I believe that Mississippi State is coming off a bye, so they played that Texas game, played it pretty tough. They do get a bye before having to travel to Georgia, so that is a benefit for them there. I don't really expect Georgia to cover this 34-point spread, mainly just because this is a game I could really see Georgia winning, 34-0. I could see it being a 35-3 kind of game. I could see it being a 35-6, 7 kind of game. So I don't know that Georgia's going to cover the spread in this one. Should be beautiful weather, from my understanding. And weather is supposed to really cool off this weekend. So that'll be kind of a fun thing to see there. Shouldn't really have to worry about rain or anything like that. Great fall football weather. I've got Georgia in this one taking care of business pretty easy. I would not say they cover the spread, though, because, again, every time I say it, they don't do it. So I'm not really going to push that far for it to be that way. So let's look at some of the other games that are going on around the country, because we do have some fun ones that are going to be happening. You got Memphis and South Florida. You got South Carolina at Alabama. Very interesting in this one. Alabama is a pretty good favorite coming into this one, I do believe. Let me see if I can get some of my other scores to come up on a better page here, because I don't like how they look right now. Here we go. Yeah, South Carolina at Alabama. South Carolina thump. This is the hard thing, and I say it every week, and it's like a broken record. But you just can't take these head-to-head matchups against these other teams who have played other teams, because if that's the case, you would feel like, all right, well, everybody's got to lose. You would think, okay, well, Vanderbilt's not going to lose to anybody else because they've now beaten Alabama. But that's not necessarily the case. Again, you take the example of South Carolina thumping the absolute daylight out of Kentucky. Kentucky then turns around and beats an Ole Miss team who Ole Miss then turned around and thumps South Carolina. So it doesn't make sense to do it that way. But I still would say South Carolina at Alabama, Alabama coming off that loss, they're going to do everything they can to absolutely crush South Carolina. South Carolina's got a lot of answers to figure out, but the only good thing for them, they do have a quarterback who's a scrambling quarterback, who obviously that proved to be difficult for the defense of Alabama, which we knew has some holes in it. And having a scrambling quarterback, I think, made a big difference for that team in Vanderbilt, and that could help South Carolina in this one. Now, the spread is Alabama's way at 21. I don't know that they cover that, but I do think South Carolina could potentially keep this one close. But in the end, I still think Alabama's going to end up rolling with it. Clemson, Wake Forest. Clemson's a big favorite in that one as well. Clemson looking a lot better. It makes that resume for Georgia look a lot better off that first game of the season. The way they were able to handle business there. You got Texas, Oklahoma, the Red River rivalry. That'll be a big one there at 3:30 on ABC. Number 1 versus number 18. Texas is a 14. I now see it as 14.5 point favorite there in that one. Penn State, USC. That one will be an interesting one. Penn State on the road, a 3.5 point favorite. Notre Dame and Stanford. That one Notre Dame should take care of business. But hey, just keep your eyes peeled for it. Cal and Pitt. That's going to be a good one there on ESPN also at 3:30. Arizona and BYU. BYU should be able to handle business. They're only a 3-point favorite at home, which I'm a little surprised by. Arizona's not the team they were last year. Florida at Tennessee. Tennessee only a 15-point favorite at the house against Florida. Florida's struggling, but hey, if they can find some answers here defensively to be able to slow some teams down, they can make things a little bit difficult, but I expect Tennessee to kind of take care of business in this. Probably what everybody's considering to be the game of the week, potentially up for grabs to be the game of the year. To match up with that Georgia-Alabama game earlier in the season is number 2 Ohio State at number 3 Oregon. That's at 7:30 on Saturday. That's on NBC and Peacock, because why not? And that's Ohio State, a 3-point favorite in that one on the road. Number 9 Ole Miss traveling to number 13 LSU. That's also a 7:30 game. So get a couple of good games there at that 7:30 slate. This is on ABC or ESPN Plus. Ole Miss on the road is a 3.5 point favorite at Death Valley at night. Very surprising. I ain't taking it. LSU's going to win this football game. Iowa State, West Virginia. Iowa State also a 3-point favorite on the road at 8 o'clock on Fox. Kansas State, number 18 Kansas State at that. 4-1, traveling to 4-1 Colorado. Kansas State a 3.5 point favorite on the road. That's a 10:15 on ESPN. You get a nice late night kick over there. What would used to be considered the Pac-12 at night, or Pac-12 after dark, whatever they would call it. Definitely a late one over there. And then I think there's a couple of other fun ones. Let me take a look at my other page over here, because I thought there were a couple of other fun looking ones. Vandy and Kentucky. Yeah, I think that's going to be a really good football game there. Can we see what Vanderbilt still has rolling? Can we see what Kentucky still has rolling? I think Kentucky also might have had the bye last week. I could be wrong about that, but I think they also had a bye. Coming off that Ole Miss win just a couple of weeks ago, and Vanderbilt obviously coming off the high of last week. Can they keep that rolling? I think that's a really good clash right there. Clash of a couple of good teams, decent defense there for Kentucky. Is that enough against a Diego Pavia who's riding on a high right now? We'll see. Washington, Iowa, I think that's also going to be a good game. Potentially low scoring. Cincinnati and UCF. Georgia Tech, North Carolina. Georgia Tech should be able to take care of business there. Louisville and Virginia. There are a couple of Friday night games coming up as well. UNLV and Utah State. That's probably one of the bigger ones. Utah and Arizona State. That might also be another big one in there. But anyways, that's most of the big games that are going on this weekend in the Week 7 games. Might be Week 8. Is it technically Week 8? Because Week 0 Well, I guess that's 0. So it's got to be week 7 because there's only 2 teams right now that are 6-0 that I remember looking at. So, and I had that wrong. I was doing the recap last week, and I was saying that the first team, and I think I was saying the only team right now that's 6-0. That's not correct. There are 2 teams that are 6-0 in the top 25. So a couple of them already bowling on the season. But that's going to kind of round out our games that are going on around the league. And that'll kind of wrap us up here. I'll make sure that we come back and kind of talk about this recap of this game, plus all these other big games that are going on. Kind of a slower week, at least around here with Georgia. There are a couple of big games on tap this weekend. Of course, last week there was only a couple of games that were on tap as well, and we got a wild weekend. So let's see if the Wild Wild West continues in college football this weekend. But otherwise, I will check in with you guys later on in the week. We will recap the Mississippi State game, some of these other games, and then we'll start getting prepared for Texas next week. But you got to take care of business this week first. We'll check in with you guys later on. Go Dogs.